Right, anyway, by the way, MSL, I know people, since we're just touching on some trivia before we really get into the important topics, I've got one thing I want to ask you, just to see what your answer is to it. Because you know when people, in English the word is retcon, it's where when something happens now, you change all of the past to just fit what happened now. So an obvious example would be like, let's say Kenny S now isn't very good. What you do if you're a hater is you go, well, he was never any good, he was just over, you do that, like you change all the history. One of the things people always do to you is they have that famous meme where they go, if anyone ever gets good in MSL's team, he just kicks them. What would you say to that meme? I don't think I've ever seen you like fully address it in public. So what are your thoughts on that? Because obviously the two players they're thinking of is basically Magisk and Config, right? As far as I remember MSL, they didn't just get kicked like when they were the MVPs. There was a bit of time between then. So what would you say to this like weird meme that people have? Because the reason I thought it up is obviously the joke people made after DreamHack Stockholm is you got too good because you won the MVP, so you had to kick yourself. That was the meme. At least that one was funny. I'll give them credit. That one was actually good. What do you think of this like weird reputation you carried in that sense though?
I think a lot of people have opinions and they don't know what has happened in the team or what is going on within the team, which makes sense. Like how should they know? But yeah, a lot of things happens within a team, and I don't want to touch too much in deep about, like, I think Config even said in your interview some of the stuff to you.
Basically, it wasn't about his play, right? It was actually like,
yeah, of course
mostly it was attitude problems with these players, right? It wasn't that they were just bad players.
Like, both Magisk and Config is obviously insane players and probably some of the best I played with, also the ones I had most success with. So it's not so much about in-game stuff at all, actually. It's mostly about out-game stuff. And yeah, some things, maybe when you look back, you would have made something different. But in the end,
can't
you
know
made
that in the moment, can you?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I would say going back, I don't think it would make any difference being the wiser I am now. I still think it would happen because some things you can't like. I think Config was in such a bad place that you couldn't help him, and in an organization like North, it was very professional with like staff behind and how you should go to the office and play. You should do all these kind of things, go to sports psychologist and so on. So I think it kind of broke him in some way, also with some personal stuff, and in the end, it was just unfixable, I would say. Like, to have a team working with him, because some things like trust and so on, you can lose within that time. And yeah, in terms of Magisk, I think it was mostly out game. I don't want to touch too much on that, but yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, I think you've got the gist of it anyway. By the way, I'd also say as well, if people don't realise in that scenario, I don't know if Magisk has ever addressed it, but like Config, as you say in that interview, he basically understands that it had to happen in his career. Like, I'm pretty sure things like that is actually how he got to wherever he is now, where he seems to be in a way better place. That's one of those things fans always ignore as well, because they're just looking at the play and the server. They love to classically be like, but this guy's really good. It's like, yeah, but what if he ruins the whole team environment? What if he was his own worst enemy? There's good reasons to kick people that don't have to do with shooting people with the crosshair. But we could tie that in actually to a topic that's very relevant right now, which is when you were saying there about the North organisation, right? One of the things, I know from the outside, North also has a terrible reputation as an org now, and people see it as like a loser org, and it wasted all the money, and, they fucked up all the FC Copenhagen sponsorship. But one thing I actually think people don't understand is, from my perspective, this is why I wanted to get your thoughts on this and tie it into some of the free agent market now, general managers, 'cause it's kind of like a big topic at the moment. One thing I actually think when I look at North, that was the flaw, was they tried to do what a lot of orgs now are doing, actually, which is bring in ex-players, make them sort of, the term back then usually wasn't general manager, it was like director of esports or whatever, you have some term like that, or director of Counter-Strike. You bring in some ex-pro, so in the case of North, like, the people they brought in, if you don't know, if you're a fan, are literally the most legendary names in the history of Danish Counter-Strike. They brought in, arguably, like, on paper, the two smartest people to ever play Danish Counter-Strike at that point in time. They brought in Wimp, who was a legend from 1.6, and Ave, who was considered by some the greatest in-game leader to ever play CS. So you'd think, right, if I'm bringing these people in to, man up the project and help to frame how it's going to be done professionally and bring players in, you would think these guys must know the game. But I know from talking to those guys myself and having contacts in North, they kind of told me part of the problem was. Like some of a lot of their like knowledge of CS didn't really like translate, and some of them hadn't been following CSGO, and like some of them even just told me straight up like those were kind of the first years they'd even tried doing that role, so they didn't know what they were doing themselves. Like some of it didn't work. What would you say, MSL? What were the problems in North in that sense? Because obviously one of the things people look at, which I do agree with, is it didn't do some. There wasn't really like big name signings for those last few years. It was a lot of like gambles or like underwhelming ones or nobodies. Like you didn't really get the big names like that were in the Mad Lions teams and the Heroics of the world. Like some of these people went by you and to other teams. So what would you say was the downfall of North in that sense? And what do you think on this angle of the executives and the staff, etc.?
Yeah, I have to watch out what I say, because I obviously have my opinion and maybe Wimp have a different view.
Of course, yeah.
But my opinion was that we focused too much on outgame stuff as like fitness. I remember with Wimp, we had to go up at 8 o'clock to do fitness, and then we did like, what is this workout called? The CrossFit, where you just destroy yourself.
You just wreck yourself physically. It's mega cardio,
like,
basically.
I remember going up to practice and I couldn't feel my arms, and I just think that stuff like this and sports psychologists, like where you get forced. If you get forced to do as a sports psychologist, I feel like it's not a good thing. I will say in the end here, we had a great sports psychologist where it was mostly about like making the team together and so on, and I think he is like he's in the football team now as well, and works with really good football players. He's really good. So I think in the end some things were right, but when it was with Wimp and Ave, it was just all over the place, and I think it's one of the reasons why, for example, Config went away from it, because there was so much like looking back, we didn't really play so much CS because we had to do so much other stuff. And I think in the end, playing a lot of CS will make a huge difference. And I would say that is a big thing. And I mean, in the end, actually, we had like half a year where it went really bad, where we had merge and so on. But then we got Mixwell for one event and won that. Then without practice, then we got Nico in and won DreamHack Stockholm and lost the major. And basically, like, we went to the major 3 days after. We had no practice. We had like the same tactics. We couldn't create something new, so we were so easy to read, and they read us, and that's just it. And then I got kicked. I got told it was because of a tweet that I made about the major, but I think it was also me and Wimp not being on the same page, because I pushed for more like that we should play more, we should focus more on CS, where he wanted to focus, on CS as well, but also a lot of outgame, and we just didn't fit together. And I would say that in the end, it would be either me or Wimp that should go, and they kicked me. And I would say that's the most annoying part in my career, because I felt like we had the team that I wanted, and I think we could have been something great with that team.
I can understand a lot of those concepts from Wimp, just because I feel like, I mean, when I stepped in as a coach too, like even being out of date with like current practice trends and even some of my Counter-Strike knowledge, a little bit out of date stepping in. But I think because I know Wimp was around when I was playing 1.6 as well. We have like a lot of ideas, and like that like work in theory. They're like ideas that sound really good. Like, we're going to get everyone up and we're going to get everyone working out because it is healthy and it can help you. Maybe not doing like fucking crazy ass CrossFit, but maybe, I don't like whatever it might be, something a little bit more chill.
Just
maybe
basic regime. Yeah.
Maybe you'll just run like a mile or something like that. And I know like when I came in like to Liquid, I wanted to do like a lot more like dry running and a lot more like boring stuff in the server and everything. But they're like, it's not that they're not effective, but it's like, speaking from Wimp, I know like I would look at how Liquid had been practicing when I joined and trying to get them to do, I'm like, oh, like we got good back in the day by doing this, this, and this. And then you realize there's just so many tools out right now that make a lot of those ideas like obsolete. Like dry running makes fucking sense when you can't go to YouTube and watch like a demo and immediately pick up all the smokes and flashes, or when like there's these complex lineups and stuff nowadays that we didn't have back then at 1.6. So I mean, that's not to defend him. I just understand. I know a lot of the ideas that I brought in early on, like you could just tell within like a week or two, just like
it's like you don't know why it doesn't work. Yeah, it
good in theory, and then you're like, but you know, one, maybe the players don't buy in, and even if it's the best idea ever, it's not going to work if the players aren't bought in. And then two, maybe it sounds like a really cool idea, but once you put it into practice, you realize this isn't nearly as effective as I'd like it to be. And I mean, that's just an obstacle that I know I've ran into as well early on as a coach.
Yeah, I feel like those are the sorts of things that might give you like a really slight edge. So if we had a tournament circuit where you were building up to a really big tournament, like maybe you could do that. Maybe if you were building up to a major, you could do that. But it just feels like you have just tournaments all the time, right? So you just can't really do a lot of these things that might give you the very slight edge that you might see in normal sports. That's the way I see it anyway.
I would like to comment on that because I agree, like fitness and so on is great, and I also, like, after being in North for so long, I have built like fitness and doing training routines and eating more healthy and so on. So I will say that North have done a lot of great things for me as a person to get in my life, but the way I see it and saw it is that fitness and sports psychologist and so on is the last percentage to get you good. But the problem is, if you're so far away from the top, it's not about the last percentage. It's about like the big 80%. Percentage, in game. And this was my kind of view. And you have to like be really, really good for a period, and then I think you can. The more you get things in game fixed, the more you can focus a bit more out game and so on.
Yes, I definitely agree, especially because like it's actually one of the areas where, in my opinion, in the scene, Astralis has actually like skewed everyone's perspective and made them over-focus on those elements. I know why they do it, because it's part of their PR to kind of make it look like, wow, we're like the most innovative org, therefore buy the stock and stuff, we're a big company. I get why they do it, it's good PR, but the problem is, that also is, they did that with people forget this. Yeah, this lineup was like the greatest ever. The one they had before that won that first major was still pretty fucking good. It was like a top 3 team in the world for almost a year. So I don't think people realise you can add some of those little details in when you've already got everything else squared away. Like we're saying here, like the practice is great, all the players are on board, everyone's winning. In fact, if you're like the third best team, you might be even more motivated to do it. Maybe that's the last little thing that'll take you to number one. But I tell you what, if you're one of those orgs who tries to do things like that, like make people work out, make them eat a healthy diet when they don't want to do it, if you're like the 13th best team in the world, you're going to have problems just because of that, mate. Like, I don't think people think about that. Like, yeah, in theory, I'd like it if everyone had, really healthy diet. But I tell you what, maybe we have different ideas of what healthy is. If you come and tell me that I have to eat what you're telling me I have to eat, maybe that would be a nightmare for me. Maybe I'd rebel against that, even if it was, in theory, the right move, I could see how plenty of players would be pissed off for that.
I'm just cracking up thinking about MSL and the whole team rolling in so fucking sore.
That sounds hilarious, doesn't it?
Yeah. Their arms are just too sore to even move the fucking mouse. That cracks me up.
It was rough.
Well, it's funny because my brother is an old school Counter-Strike player as well, and he's also like a bit of a fitness nut also. And like whenever one of my players has like a bad game, he messaged me. He's like, "Hey, yo, go get this guy and like take him outside and get some yoga mats and do like push-ups and sit-ups with him and have him go through a whole routine, listen to music, get him back in the right mindset." And it's like, that'd be cool. I get it, but if he's not so much like, I don't think this guy's worked out ever in his life. I don't think it's going to work the way you want it to.
Indeed.
People have to buy into it for sure.
Yep.
And I think the older you get, the more you understand, like, and learn and adapt.